Your husband is about to die. Please come here immediately. Excuse me, out of the blue, a man claiming to be a police officer dropped this bombshell. And I was taken aback, wondering who would call me on a Sunday morning. I answered the phone only to be greeted with this. It felt like I was caught in some bad dream. What do you mean by that? As my mind raced, I asked what had happened to my husband. You'll understand once you get here. Just come to this building right away. The police quickly informed me of a location that seemed to be a condo. Without understanding the situation, I jotted down the address. The call ended there, and I couldn't get half the information I wanted. What should I do? Going there alone felt unsettling. Thinking this, I decided to reach out to relatives living nearby, and we all headed to the scene together. My name is Nancy. I'm a 35-year-old old school teacher. I live with my husband, Bob, and we reside close to both our parents' homes. We were in the same middle school, which is why our parents' homes are near each other. Bob and I reconnected at a middle school reunion 5 years ago. It had been 15 years since we met last time, and the reunion itself was the first in 10 years. I remember being surprised at the turnout of about a dozen people at the hotel's buffet, more than I expected. In our 30s, we caught up on jobs, marriages, and kids, and the atmosphere was lively. Many were already married, and I felt a bit out of place being single. Back then, I was focused solely on my career without a boyfriend or prospect of marriage, feeling somewhat frustrated. Hey, is that you, Nancy? As I grew tired of nodding along to my friends' happy family stories, someone tapped my shoulder and started talking. That person was my now husband, Bob. Yes, it's been a while. Bob was the student leader in middle school, and I was the assistant. Though we were closer than I was with other boys, going to different high schools meant we lost touch after. Graduation, it's been a while. Want to grab a drink over there? Bob always had a sharp mind, and that hadn't changed. He spoke clearly and confidently, showing no hesitation in asking me out. Sure, I left my friend's circle, somewhat relieved to escape their constant happiness. Along with Bob, he smoothly talked about everything from middle school memories to his current apprenticeship at a different restaurant, to eventually take over his family's dining establishment. Inspired by him, I shared my experiences as a school teacher. Bob listened intently, making me feel genuinely appreciated for the first time in a while. Thanks for today. Let's meet again. Thank you too. See you soon. Surprisingly, I found myself eagerly agreeing to Bob's invitation. What I thought would be an uneventful reunion turned into a new chapter with a classmate, Bob. We went on to date, going out for meals and movies without any trouble. As I worked at a local school and Bob worked close to his home, it was astonishing to find a classmate living so near after all this time. Our dates went well, and Bob eventually confessed his feelings, making us officially a couple. Even as we started dating, our frequency of meetings didn't change much. However, Bob worked in the hospitality industry, so he couldn't always take weekends off, which made me a bit anxious. But I figured this was part of adult relationships and decided I needed to be more patient. Nancy, sorry to keep you waiting. Let's get married. Bob proposed to me on my 32nd birthday, 2 years after we started dating. Yes, of course. Thank you. I had always thought if I were to marry, it would be to Bob, so I accepted his proposal without hesitation. That night, we went to sleep feeling utterly blissful. When it came to marrying Bob, the first step was to meet my parents. My parents are always calm and generally have a welcoming attitude, so when Bob came over as my fiancé, they were delighted, saying, "A kind person like Bob, we're totally on board." Perhaps buoyed by my parents' positive reaction, Bob drank quite a bit that evening. Next, it was my turn to meet Bob's parents. I was nervous since I heard his family owned a traditional dining establishment. On the day of our meeting, Bob's family restaurant was reserved just for us. We were led to a private room, and I couldn't help but express my admiration. Bob is going to take over the family business, as you see. Are you okay with that? Bob's mother asked me, with her hand on her cheek, a gesture of elegance. Yes, I've heard about the family business multiple times. I'm aware that eventually Bob will take over, and I'll be there to support him, I replied, my words stiff with nervousness. That's reassuring. Both of you, do your best. Despite their initially stern appearance, Bob's parents were warmer than I expected, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Were you nervous? Bob asked me softly, kissing me that night. Yeah, but your parents seem nice. Really, they're always strict with me. They were just putting on an act today. Bob shrugged, turning it into a light-hearted conversation. I felt that under the care of such parents, joining Bob in running the family business might not be so bad. Our marriage began with the blessing of both our parents, starting our life together on a positive note. Initially, our married life seemed to go smoothly without any particular issues. We both worked, so we shared household chores, and we spent our days off together. Bob was always busy, but never failed to show his care, greeting me tired from work every day. I felt incredibly fortunate to be with Bob. However, as our marriage progressed, I sensed a gradual change in Bob's attitude. The turning point seemed to be when a doctor informed us that I had difficulty conceiving. Despite our efforts, we couldn't have children, and we decided to seek medical advice. The results showed no issues on Bob's end, but problems on mine. It's unfortunate, but it can't be helped, Bob. I'm sorry, I said. No need for you to apologize. This is something decided by fate. Bob comforted me with kind words, rubbing my back as I felt down. However, contrary to his words, Bob seemed to feel a sense of disappointment towards me at that time. After it became clear we couldn't have children, Bob no longer approached me at night, and his attitude even started to feel distant. The household chores, which we used to share, became solely my responsibility as Bob claimed, I've been really busy lately. My family's also been nagging me to train at the restaurant on my days off. I need to grow enough to be able to trust the business to someone else. I couldn't believe these harsh words were actually coming from his parents, who, although they looked stern, had never been harsh to me. In fact, they always thanked me for joining their family. Thus, Bob's words felt more like a sneer at me for not being able to bear children. Okay, but could you help out a bit when work calms down? Between work and house chores, my body's crying out, I said. This was the truth. Even in elementary education, the workload and interpersonal relationships can be taxing. Coming home to a mountain of chores only added to my exhaustion. Sure, when things settle down, Bob said to smooth over the situation, but he never helped with the chores after that. Bob's attitude worsened day by day. Not only did he stop helping around the house, but he also started complaining about the meals I cooked and the ironing. This is too spicy. Tone it down or you'll lose the flavor of the ingredients. You missed some wrinkles on this shirt. Are you slacking? Hey, I found hair in the bedroom. Clean it up, will you? It seemed like Bob was looking for any excuse to criticize my housekeeping, especially his complaints about my cooking. Being the son of a restaurant owner, he grew up eating fine food and had a discerning palate. His detailed complaints about the ironing and cleaning felt like veiled criticisms of me. If you're going to complain that much, why don't you do it all? I snapped back at him, unable to contain my frustration. What? I'm telling you, I'm exhausted from work every day. Plus, I'm getting all this pressure from my parents. And, forget it, Bob said, clearly stressed, angrily scratching his head and throwing the TV remote onto the floor. What are you doing? I was shocked. He had never resorted to throwing things before. Was I mistaken about the kind of person Bob was? Doubt crept in, shaking my confidence in my choices. It's all your fault. I'm like this because you can't have kids. My parents are putting pressure on me. Bob hurled these cruel words at me, visibly agitated. I was more shocked than angry and ended up bedridden for days. During this time, Bob would leave the house all day, citing training at the restaurant on his days off. The old Bob would never have left me alone when I was unwell. His change was heartbreaking, and I found myself crying one morning. I was surprised when he came home. I was training hard until late last night. So tired, he said, collapsing onto the bed as soon as he got home. There seemed to be a faint smell of shampoo. Did you really spend last night training at the restaurant? I asked, concerned. He glared at me. What, you're dubbing me? I shook my head reflexively. Bob's recent late returns were unusual, but as the expected successor of a traditional restaurant, his excuses of prolonged training sessions were something I had to accept. Alone, I spent my days troubled both at work and while doing chores. Then one day, I ran into my mother-in-law at the supermarket. "What a coincidence to see you here, Nancy," she greeted me with a warm smile. Then suddenly, she clapped her hands as if remembering something. "Nancy, Bob hasn't been coming home lately, and we're quite troubled. He's busy, isn't he? We have a lot we want to teach him, and we've told him to come over when he's free." Her words puzzled me. I was shocked to hear my mother-in-law's words. Bob always says he's going to his parents' house on his days off. He comes back late at night or in the morning, saying how tough the training was. Hearing this, my mother-in-law looked confused, and it was clear our stories didn't match. "What do you mean?" Her gentle eyes sharpened, perhaps realizing a significant fact. "Well, according to you, Bob hasn't been going to the restaurant. That means he's been lying to me and going out late." A chill ran down my spine. Bob had complained about being pressured by his parents due to the succession issue, blaming me since we couldn't have children. I felt guilty every time he mentioned it. But if my mother-in-law's story was true, then Bob was sneaking out for no apparent reason. Does this mean? I swallowed hard, gauging her reaction. Her eyebrows twitched. Yes, this is quite concerning. We exchanged glances, probably sharing the same thoughts. Bob was hiding something from us. That's it. I'll be more cautious about Bob's actions. Yeah, I'll let you know if I find anything concerning on my end. Our women's intuition aligned, and we parted ways, each lost in thought about what to do with Bob. The realization that I needed to uncover the truth about Bob and possibly gather evidence began to dawn on me. Should I hire a detective, or should I try to uncover what Bob does on his days off by myself? 2 weeks passed as I pondered my options, during which Bob continued to claim he was visiting his parents' house on his days off, often returning home late at night. I kept in touch with my mother-in-law, confirming that Bob hadn't been to his parents' house. Just as I was about to seriously consider hiring a private investigator, I received a phone call one Sunday morning. Bob had said he would be staying overnight at his workplace for training and had left the house since yesterday. Hesitantly, I looked at the unknown number on my phone screen and debated whether to answer, thinking it might be my mother-in-law or father-in-law, whose number I hadn't saved yet. "Hello," I answered cautiously. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other line. "This is the police. Is this Nancy?" The word police made me exclaim. What could the police possibly want with me? Curious, I responded, "Yes, that's me." The caller, now assured they were speaking to the right person, urgently said, "Your husband is about to die. Please come here immediately." "Excuse me." Suddenly, a man claiming to be a police officer uttered words I never expected, and I was taken aback. Wondering who would call me on a Sunday morning, I answered the phone only to be greeted with this. It felt like I was caught in some bad dream. "What do you mean by that?" As my mind raced, I asked what had happened to Bob. "You'll understand once you get here." Just come to this building right away." The police quickly informed me of a location that seemed to be an apartment. Without understanding the situation, I jotted down the address. The call ended there, and I couldn't get half the information I wanted. What should I do? Going there alone felt unsettling. Thinking this, I decided to reach out to relatives living nearby. Luckily, both my parents and Bob's parents responded immediately. Moreover, my mother-in-law even called Bob's uncle and aunt to join us. With this many people, we should be okay, no matter what happens. I felt reassured as we all headed to the scene together. "Hey, is Bob okay?" "I don't know, but we have to go." My mother and both sets of parents were visibly shaken. Bob's parents were particularly frantic, hearing that their son's life was in danger, despite his recent strange behavior. I didn't want him to lose his life. He was still my husband. Praying for Bob's safety, we arrived at the scene as described by the police. It was an ordinary condo with an auto-lock entrance. We rang the intercom from room 304. I found it strange that despite being a police matter, not a single patrol car was parked in front of the condo. But my relatives seemed too focused on Bob's safety to notice anything. "Miss, please come in right away." The officer at the intercom seemed rushed. Once the auto-lock door opened, we hurriedly took the elevator to room 304. The door to room 304 was properly closed. Normally in situations like this, wouldn't the police have the door open for investigation by now? Everyone else seemed to realize something was off too. I hesitantly reached for the doorknob. The door wasn't locked and opened easily. As we slowly walked down the short hallway, my mother-in-law was the first to open the door to the living room. "Oh, what is this?" her scream echoed from the front. I cautiously peered into the living room from behind her. I doubted my own eyes at the unexpected scene. There was Bob sitting naked with a young woman sitting next to him, draped in nothing but a bath towel. I was taken aback, and next to them stood the man who I presumed had called me, dressed in a suit. He looked more like an ordinary businessman than a police officer. The man turned to us and spoke. "I'm sorry for lying about being the police and calling you. I am Tom, the husband of the woman sitting here, Juliana. This is our home." "Wait, a lie?" "Wife, husband," my mother-in-law murmured in confusion. During this, Bob and Juliana were blushing furiously. "Could you please explain what's going on?" It became clear that we were lied to by this man, claiming to be the police. However, understanding that Tom had no intention of harming us, I calmly asked for the truth. "Well, actually," Tom began explaining the situation in response to my question. "I've been noticing something odd about my wife lately. She's been coming home unusually late for a part-time job, always using the same excuse about sudden absences at work. At first, I brushed it off, but then she started leaving the house even on her days off, and recently she's only been working 2 days a week, despite previously working 5. She said she just felt tired and cut down her shifts, which left me feeling uneasy. That's because I really was feeling overwhelmed." Juliana tried to justify herself, but in this situation, her words seemed hollow. Tom continued. "I naturally started suspecting an affair. I asked her things like, 'Who are you out drinking with today?' Or 'What's your relationship with your friend's boyfriend?' hoping she'd slip up, but she never did. She was very careful. So I changed my strategy. I lied about going on a business trip yesterday, installed hidden cameras at home, and left." "Isn't installing hidden cameras a crime?" Bob shouted out. I glared at him fiercely. "And you have the right to talk." "There's nothing you can argue here." Seeing Bob's frustrated expression, Tom resumed his story. "I stayed at a hotel nearby last night. All the while, I was watching the house through a camera. All the camera system streams live to my smartphone. Then this happened. This man came into the room and quickly got involved with Juliana. That's the gist of it. I wanted to burst into the room and catch them in the act, but after seeing them fall asleep naked, I thought, why not call his family too and make a big scene out of it? I came home early in the morning while they were still asleep and caught them just like this. I got his wife's contact information by threatening him a bit. "Sorry for my bad idea," Tom said in a calm tone. However, the fact he sneaked hidden cameras into his home and called me, Bob's wife, to expose his wife's infidelity showed he was determined to fully retaliate for the humiliation he suffered. After Tom finished his story, Juliana cried out, "You're the worst, old man." But Tom didn't even flinch. It seemed like he was silently saying, "Who's the worst here, Juliana?" Probably just starting her career, Juliana might not have been satisfied with Tom, who appeared to be in his mid-30s or even 40s due to his mature look. Bob was about the same age, but he looked younger, so it wouldn't be strange for Juliana to choose him as a lover. I was appalled at myself for analyzing the situation so coldly. As his wife, damn it, you all gang up on us and blame us. That's dirty. After all, it's Anna's and that man's fault for not satisfying their partners, isn't it? Bob defiantly argued back after being presented with irrefutable evidence of his affair. Amidst the scorn from everyone, I had to admit his spirit to fight back was commendable. But of course, I couldn't forgive Bob. I stepped forward from beside my mother-in-law. "Who's the dirty one here? After you knew I couldn't have children, you started blaming me, saying the family expects you to find a successor since you can't produce one. So, Bob, you better take over." All lies, weren't they? Pressure? We never said such things. What about you, Dad? I just wanted to teach Bob about the work. We never mentioned anything about a successor. My in-laws looked puzzled, as if wondering what was going on. It doesn't seem like they would pressure you like that. Yeah, right. Bob's aunt and uncle also expressed doubt. Bob looked down, embarrassed. See, your mother and father never pressured you, yet you blamed me and criticized everything from my cooking to cleaning. I always wondered why I had to be criticized like that. But now I understand. You just wanted to provoke me into starting a divorce, didn't you? That's Bob's face twisted in defeat. It seemed I hit the nail on the head. Utterly disappointed, I couldn't comprehend why he would lie about something so easily discovered. Given our families lived close by, the thought of him being infatuated with a woman much younger than himself made me feel sick. I regretted ever being happy about marrying Bob, thinking we could have a lively and enjoyable married life. Now feeling betrayed, I nodded in agreement with Tom, who seemed to share my humiliation. "Juliana, I'm divorcing you," Tom declared firmly. "Why?" I was seduced by this man. He forced his way into my place and overpowered me on the bed. In a last-ditch effort to blame Bob, Juliana turned her betrayal towards him. Bob looked at her in shock. "Hey, what are you talking about? Why am I being made out to be the bad guy here? You knew I was married when you approached me at the bar. That's the crime." Bob and Juliana started arguing while still naked. Faced with their low-level blame game, my in-laws, my parents, and the other relatives were too appalled to speak. The hidden camera footage would easily reveal that Juliana's claim about Bob forcing her was a lie. Fed up with their pathetic squabble, Tom and I reached our limit. "Listen, both of you. Who do you think you're arguing with? Cheating on your spouses is a fact, isn't it? I'm also divorcing Bob." That's right. Instead of fighting each other, apologize to us first, and then get out of this house. Startled, Bob and Juliana trembled. Our outcry emboldened the in-laws to join in the condemnation. "Bob, you no longer have the right to take over our business. Apologize to Nancy now. I'm done with you. Solve your own problem, got it? As relatives, we're embarrassed by you. We won't be lending you any money either." "What? No." Bob looked at his in-laws and me with eyes begging for mercy. as if he had hoped his parents would help him. So be prepared. After I said this calmly, Bob finally gave up, stood up, dressed in his scattered clothes, and left the Takahashi household. Juliana, left behind, turned to Tom and pleaded. I'm sorry, but Tom saw it as nothing more than an attempt at tearful manipulation. Throwing clothes at her and throwing her out of the house, left behind, all of us looked at each other, sighing in disbelief at what had transpired. Nancy, I'm truly sorry for the trouble my foolish son has caused. My in-laws apologized to me. Despite having such wonderful parents, I wondered how Bob turned out the way he did. It's all Bob's doing. You were not to blame. Later on, Bob and I divorced. It turned out Bob's affair with Juliana began after he learned of my inability to conceive. Though I felt sorry for that aspect, it was no excuse for infidelity. I remembered all the hurtful things Bob had thrown at me and demanded a suitable amount for alimony. Bob, lacking the means to pay the demanded sum up front, ended up in debt. It seemed like he could have easily paid it back if he had taken over the family restaurant, but his parents decided against letting him inherit it after his betrayal. With no need to work at the restaurant, he had been training under the guise of preparation. Bob was revealed to have skipped shifts multiple times to meet Juliana, leading to his dismissal by the furious restaurant owner. Now, having lost both his wealth and job, Bob is on the hunt for new employment. Having thought he would live his life through cooking, Bob became almost like a shell of his former self after losing his purpose. Midway through his 30s, he lacks the drive to be in another industry, barely getting by with part-time jobs in food service. But part-time work hardly scratches the surface of his debt. Instead of job hunting, Bob has fallen into gambling, hoping for a big win to turn his fortunes around. At this rate, he's on track for a life buried in debt, a thought I entertain with a sense of detachment. Let him struggle with the consequences of his self-destructive lifestyle. Quietly, I contemplate Bob's downfall from afar. Meanwhile, I've decided to re-enter the dating scene. Though I thought I might take a break from marriage, my in-laws encouraged me to find someone better. Recently, a man who said he didn't want children and wanted to get to know me reached out. He seemed sincere and stable. With him, I feel a glimmer of hope for starting over.